Yeah. Sorry, that was, yeah.
And I, to be honest, I know people who've been in the market. So I think we all have, you know, I get, yeah. Got one file.
That's all
And then a second.
Okay, well, thank you.
So there it is. 2 years.
That's very smart.
The interchange, you gotta take all the rest of the.
I like that.
So we can.
I'm not leaning.
Yeah, well.
I don't forget, my wife actually.
The last outing I went through was 40.
So yes, no, maybe so.
That's it. Ran back then to change.
You got that. Mess up on that.
It's on. Somehow this is the stuff.
Welcome, good afternoon. Item 2, roll call. We're going to ask everyone at the table to tell us who they are and who they represent for roll call purposes. Then we're going to go around the room to get the folks on the outside perimeter. So I'm Bill North.
I'm Renee Turk from Salem.
David Radford, Roanoke County.
Mike Stovall, Town of Benton.
Cody Sexton, Town of Benton, and Chair of the TTC.
Peter Paulson, City of Roanoke.
Lori Smith, Franklin County.
Ken King, VDOT.
Megan Cronite, Roanoke County.
Hunter Holiday, City of Salem.
Steve Clinton, Valley County.
Steve Fitchikowski, Vice Chair in Montgomery County.
Virginia Mullen, Regional Commission.
Jeremy Hall, Secretary of the TPO.
And we'll start over here on the left.
Tori Williams, I'm the Director of Transportation at the RVTPO.
Nick Baker, planner, Botetourt County, TTC member of Botetourt County.
Robert Dirk, citizen representative on the Regional Commission. I'm Phil McMillan, Town of Benton, and DC Committee.
Michael Gray, VDOT Planning.
Anthony Ford, VDOT.
Pete Peter, Town of Benton.
Chris Dorsey, City Manager, Salem.
Allison Sinetti,
Jonathan Stanton, Regional Commission.
Andrea Gardner, Regional Commission.
Brian Hill, Regional Commission.
Elizabeth Elmore, Regional.
We have a forum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, moving to item 3, approval of consent agenda items. A, approval of the agenda, and B, action on the December 14th RVTPO minutes. Do I have motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to item 4, remarks by the chair. Today, we're live streaming our meeting on the Roanoke Valley-Alleghany Regional Commission's Facebook page, part of our ongoing effort to improve public awareness of the important work undertaken by the Roanoke Valley Transportation Planning Organization. We want to remind anyone watching that they are always welcome to address the TPO via one of our public hearings or in person during the public comment period at each meeting. RVTPO staff are starting to develop the annual Unified Planning Work Program, acronym UPWP, for the fiscal year 2025. Along with the various continuing and federally required projects the commission undertakes each year. Staff are now accepting work program project requests from our local government members, as well as community organizations in partnership with our localities. Transportation projects that can be included in the UPWP should focus on model, corridor, and other transportation projects in the TPO's urbanized boundaries. Some project submissions can also be considered for the rural transportation work program and other regional commission sources as appropriate. Please contact TPO Secretary Jeremy Holmes or Director of Transportation Tori Williams for questions on any project submissions. Also, mark your calendars for April 25th meeting of the TPO. Transportation Board Representative Dr. Ray Smoot on the Commonwealth Transportation Board for this area will be in attendance to offer his thoughts on the conclusion of the General Assembly session and the future transportation funding for our region. As always, if any TPO member would like us to reach out to other transportation officials in the Commonwealth to present to this body, just let Jeremy Holmes know if he'll follow up. Finally, on Tuesday, January the 16th, the Commonwealth Transportation Board reconsidered their earlier December decision to remove land use as a factor in the smart scale process. As part of their comprehensive review of smart scale in 2023, the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment had proposed to convert land use to a multiplier to increase benefit points across the other factor areas. This recommendation was driven by their finding that the land use factor was having an oversized influence on the process, giving too much emphasis to project location than to expected project outcomes. As you will recall, the CTB not only rejected this recommendation, but they also removed land use as a factor altogether in the smart scale process, adjourned and went home for Christmas. Since the December meeting, questions emerged over whether the state code requires land use to be included in the process. The Senate Majority Leader submitted a budget amendment delaying all changes to smart scale until land use was reincorporated. The end result was the CTB adopted the recommendation as originally approved by the Office of Intermodal Planning and Investment. So land use has returned. And those are all the comments I have. Moving on to item 5. 2024 MAP 21 safety performance targets on page 21. The chair recognizes Brian Hill.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. For those of you that have been on the board a year, at least a year, this has become commonplace. But for those that have not, we'll do a quick introduction to the item. Since 2018, the RVTPO had adopted a series of 5 safety performance measures under the, at the time, current federal transportation legislation referred to as MAP 21, moving ahead for progress in the 21st century. And since then, on an annual basis, these targets for the 5 performance measures have been updated. So to talk a bit about how we choose those, the MPOs have the option to either A, adopt a series of targets that are developed by VDOT, or to develop their own methodology and collect data to that end. We have historically adopted the VDOT targets, and what you see here on the first slide is the future target annual percentage reductions. This data is then used to determine the targets, and we see for For positive numbers, that represents an increase. So we see number of fatalities, for example, 4.01%. Yes, that does indicate a projected target increase. Negative numbers, obviously a decrease. So that, again, that translates to the proposed 2024 target values. We have some data from 2022 actual values. We have, for comparison purposes, we've got the previous 2023 target values. So we have the number of fatalities, the fatality rate, the number of serious injuries, the serious injury rate, and the VMT is for vehicle miles traveled, and the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries. So this was presented to the TTC last month, and we had some discussion about the possibility of for next year in 2025, having staff, and as was mentioned by the chair earlier, in the development of the UPWP next year to have staff look at the possibility of developing our own methodology for regional methodology for safety targets. And so that was discussed and recommended at the TTC. So we'll have language in the draft UPWP to reflect that work. But nevertheless, the TTC did recommend the adoption of the VDOT safety performance targets for 2024 as presented.
Hey, any questions for Brian on the performance measure targets? You know, it seems so morbid that we're projecting fatalities. I'm sorry, I just had to say that. I know that what we should be doing is seeing a reduction in fatalities, not an increase. So in my opinion, we should seem to be the same or less. Or you would like to comment on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, you either predicted my question or hitting the nail on the head. The discussion that Brian mentioned, and that's mentioned in the final paragraph of the staff report, actually had to do with fatalities. It was actually a representative from Roanoke City leading the way on that if the city and other localities or even the state are seeking a vision zero for fatalities, then what level of acceptability would it be that we have an increase in fatalities being predicted? So that, at least for that fatality target value, to unfortunately call it a target, that really is what spurred the discussion at the TTC to possibly develop our own methodology to see if we can adjust that in some way.
Thank you. Mr. King.
Yeah, I would suggest that perhaps we could have some of our folks within VDOT that work on these targets to come and help provide some information to consider whether you want to expend time and resources in that exercise of projections. Doing the projection is not actually improving the safety, right? It's just reporting a projection. VDOT has, a commitment to vision of zero as well. The projection is not what we want it to be, but what we analytically predict that it will be based on the difficulty of actually controlling all the factors associated with fatalities and crashes. The exposure, the vehicle travel demand, the more miles traveled that's going on, the more vehicles on the roadway, the greater exposure you have to crashes. So if your crash rate stays the same, but your volume goes up, your numbers of crashes go up, right? So that sometimes to hold at the same rate is a major victory, right? And so again, it's not an indication of what this body or the state body's goal is. It's actually an analytical projection of what they think the numbers are. Now, I will say that my own personal experience, having worked with the city of Roanoke and been responsible for their transportation system, I was always, when I first came, I was amazed at how few traffic fatalities the city of Roanoke experienced. Most fatalities that happen within the city, unfortunately, this is common in a lot of urban settings, is pedestrian, bicycle, and vulnerable road user type fatalities. And then the more I evaluated, having come from Greensboro, where we had a number of roads that had quite high speeds, Wendover Avenue and others, if you're familiar with that area, Hirschberger, we get a little bit higher speeds in the city of Roanoke, but there's really just not that many roads. You know, even when you look at how Orange Avenue operates, you don't get travel speeds that are, you know, excessively beyond 45 miles an hour. So then when you look at the communities that have that type of operating speeds in the lower range, they do have lower fatalities. So you could probably target or calibrate a different kind of fatality and injury rate that's a little bit more localized. I think the less urban parts of the TPO boundary would probably be more similar to the statewide projections, but that's also where you have less volume of traffic. But that exercise actually takes a fair amount of analytical work. And again, it gets back into the issue, is that analysis really driving the change in safety? The purpose for it is to drive awareness of bodies like these to make investments. So I just suggest that perhaps, you know, the group within VDOT that helps do that work could certainly be brought into the technical committee to give them a little bit of insight as to how that goes through, what level of effort that requires. And, you know, then the TTC could have a projection over what it would cost for this body to do that work. And you may find that, yeah, you want to make that investment to have a more informed projection, or that, you know, maybe that resource would rather be better placed on looking at, for instance, vulnerable road user exposure issues within the city as a targeted study to the true problems that might be there, or, you know, in the TPO boundary overall, as I mentioned. So I just suggest that thought be placed into the fact that these are not goals, but these are projections. And that exercise may be a worthwhile expenditure and maybe perhaps one that might could be placed in a different actionable way of improving safety, not just predicting the numbers.
Okay, are you making that a motion to return to the TDC?
I would suggest that, you know, not necessarily a motion, just that I know that myself, I'll be glad to reach out to our body and carry the, you know, the opportunity for those folks to come and engage with the TTC before that becomes an action before this board as a recommendation of the UPWC.
So where do we stand with this proposal today? Can this be returned to the TDC for further review?
I would say that this board, based on the TTC discussion, and Brian can keep me honest, the official action of the TTC was recommending adopting VDOT's 2024 performance measures. So that is our official recommendation to you all for today, to essentially continue what this body has done in years previous by adopting the VDOT measures. I think the second action of discussion, as Mr. King mentioned, is when the discussion of the UPWP comes around, whether or not to include it in that action.
Okay, so that's a motion you're making?
I don't have the ability to make a motion.
The
Mr. Chair.
gentleman next to you.
I will, sir. We'll keep going down the table, we'll find somebody.
The gentleman can repeat.
Yeah, what he said and what he said, I'll put in the motion. And she's got it, he's got it, secretary's got it.
I would second that motion. I would also add that, I think that even though it was an increase, I think it's very conservative in light of the fact that Virginia is getting ready to legalize marijuana, and I think those numbers are gonna jump way up.
Well, that's true.
So
That's true.
I think it's my second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
He's got something.
I had a question.
Yes, I'm sorry, I couldn't see you back there, lights off.
These statistics, I mean, is there a correlation or has there ever been a study, a correlation having to do with road maintenance, like on 81 or all through the state? Or is there anything that would dictate as to, you have more accidents or more fatalities with scheduled, road closures or road usage? I mean, you know, when they close the roads to pave, or they're doing like on 81 now, when they're adding lanes. Is that considered into the factor of whether you're gonna have increased activity or increased accidents, or is that?
It's a fair question, Mr. King.
I think I can speak to that at a broad level, and that is, I think for the projections that are done in the numbers we just looked at, for the state as a whole, I think it's not incorporated because it's assumed that the level of construction and maintenance activity from one year to the next is relatively the same, although the locations change around the state.
Okay.
What we do from time to time is look at a corridor, and if we're trying to specifically think about our crash exposure on a corridor, if we have construction activity and depending upon the intensity, and in the case there in through the city of Salem, the lane widths on the interstate that are very narrow right now, we do have some projections of what we think the exposure of that will be for that area. We track all work zone crashes, and we compare like how many crashes we're having, for instance, on 81 in that section that's under construction, compared to the years previous when we had no construction going on. And it's the delta of that we really try to, and the severity, we try to really focus on. Interestingly, in that section, we've been fortunate, I knock on wood as I did say that, and that our severity of crash, the actual injury fatality has been relatively low. However, the impacts tend to be trucks and the congestion impact of the problems that those crashes have occurred, both with damage in the bridge railings that's required maintenance repair, that's had to block a lane, that's, that impact has been big, but the actual severity of the injuries and fatalities, we've been fortunate that those have not been extremely severe. But we've got more to go on in that project. And then unfortunately, we have out for advertisement right now, a response for a design build contract between Interstate 581 up to exit 150. We'll get under construction with that. And indeed, things are going to get worse, before they get better in terms of our crash experience, in terms of frequency of crashes. But we certainly are going to work with enforcement and signage and speed reduction, speed enforcement, those types of strategies to make sure that we're keeping the severity of those crashes low.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So. As we get along, okay, thank you for those comments, Mr. King. Good question, Hunter. Even though I couldn't see you.
It's okay.
You gotta start watching out.
In the dark.
I'm hiding in the dark.
Yeah, all right, item 6 on the agenda, amendment to project development and selection procedures for Roanoke Valley urbanized area, some allocation funding, transportation alternative, pages 22 and 23 of your package. Brian Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We tried to get a long title. We could maybe add a couple more words to that, but nevertheless, just a bit of a background of, back in the, I guess it was in June or in the summer of last year, we looked at a variety of changes and amendments to the what was then the SDBG selection procedures document, and made that a single document that contained all of the sub-allocation funding programs, SDBG, carbon reduction program, and transportation alternatives. And in looking at the procedures and for the spoiler alert, looking at the next item, when we had conversations with some of our stakeholders, we learned a couple of things. That one, that the procedures document does not currently address out-of-cycle TA funding requests, and that is the only one of the 3 programs that does not, SDBG and CRP do. And so a proposed amendment to the procedures document will effectively create a TA adjustment process. And that is designed to provide flexibility as the other 2 programs, to provide flexibility for unforeseen budget changes. And we don't want to take that word unforeseen lightly. As you'll hear there in the next item. The adjustment process will do a few things. It will allow for out-of-cycle TA funding requests. It will authorize staff to administratively fulfill the requests with project cost increases of less than 10%. And in the staff report, we outline some of the options for how that's done. And that typically for the 10% or less, it is if there is an available balance entry of TAP funding, then we would, staff would then, work with VDOT to fulfill that request. Now, if the request is over 10%, then this process would authorize the board then to review, upon recommendation from the TTC and staff to, any project requests that, have cost increase of over 10%.
Okay,
And so that is essentially the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the, of the amendment. And if you're following along, with the staff report, the proposed language does follow the staff report, and, the TTC did, recommend, as the staff, the amendment as presented.
thank you. I'll tell you what, I wish this General Assembly moved as speedy on changes and putting them into action as this meeting today is going to illustrate. Is there any discussion on this? Any discussions? Okay. There being done, is there a motion to accept the changes proposed by Brian on transportation alternative? So moved. Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? Well, look at who's here.
Hello, Mr. North, how are you?
Fine, how are you?
No, I guess, I mean, I fully agree and support this. What is not necessarily addressed here, because I guess we're talking about a 2-year cycle, is whether this is cumulative or per event, because you could go in, you could have an increase, you could request a change, get an adjustment, that becomes your new funded amount, and then you could have additional changes. So I'm just curious whether that was discussed or considered as to whether or not this is within the 2-year cycle, it's a maximum of 10% of the project cost that was previously approved, or is it just going case by case each time something comes up?
It is case by case, and it does not, and with it being out of cycle, the funds that are allocated in the 2-year cycle are not subject to be expended from this request. It is based solely on the amount that is available at the time from a TA balance entry account. And that balance entry account is accrues from in a variety of ways. If, for example, and please, anybody from VDOT, please correct me if I'm wrong, should there be any surplus from any 2-year cycle, in other words, if we have funds available, it goes there. If a project finishes under budget, the residual then flows to that TA balance entry. So the option, really the options for the only option I see for the 10% or less increases is whether there is one, reasons that warrant the unforeseen the unforeseen increase, and 2, if there's our funds available. And then if it is over 10%, then as we mentioned, the TPO has a variety of options that they could suggest, recommend, or approve, things as scaling back the project, recommending the use of local funds, using the balance entry that we talked about, using future TAP allocations in the form of a phase 2 project, or dropping the project altogether.
Yeah, but my question is more specifically 10% of what? What do we say 10% of?
10% of the. It's
You have a
10%.
project that was initially approved
Yes.
at $200,000. You come back and you've got to change it's $15,000. That's less than 10%. Staff could approve that.
That's correct.
And then come back later with an additional $10,000 request. That would have been more than, that would have been a total of 25,000. But the way it's been presented is the second request is less than 10% again. So
Right.
I'm just asking, you know, that's why I said cumulative or how it's being, how you anticipate it operating. And we don't have to answer that
Right.
question.
Well, in a perfect world, there would only be one in a perfect world, there would only be one additional request.
Well, we know that this is not.
But you're right, it's not. I,
Where's
not
the perfect?
wanting to put words in anyone's mouth, but I would hope that any such second request would be discouraged, unless there is, again, catastrophic or unforeseen circumstance.
So it's just perceived to be sort of a one-time event.
Do we want a motion to clarify that?
I can't make a motion, sorry.
Does anyone want to discuss it further, Lori?
May I ask a
You
question?
may.
No,
I predicate my question with the fact that you guys know a lot more about this than I do. Just fundamentally, when we're talking about, out of cycle budgeting requests for a given project, are you not including, or is a contingency amount not included in a per project format that you would work within? I mean, what is going to trigger something that is an out of budget increase if there's not a contingency in place?
You'll hear specifically, in a minute, but, an activity that, was never, an activity that was unknown. Not that it was not planned for, but, something that, perhaps, was never conceived or never thought would happen in a million years, so to speak. Those type things, wherein the cost of such activity is the responsibility of the applicant.
Okay.
From the perspective of the TTC, very, very frankly, Mr. Wilhelm's comment was not discussed. It didn't come up at the TTC, and I think it didn't come up primarily because it was sort of contemplated that pretty much the only thing that would meet the bar of an unforeseen circumstance would be something found during active construction. That in the planning process, in the right-of-way process, those, are what they are, but this would be a project under active construction, receiving a change order request from something that just couldn't have been contemplated during the planning process. So I don't know if it's one or many, but it's something that boots, equipment are on the ground, the project has stopped, and it's like, hey, more money is needed to get this project out the door. That, I think, to Brian's point, unforeseen is doing a lot of work in that sentence, but.
And where time is of the essence.
Yeah, yeah, there are crews mobilized, there are crews on the ground, and something has happened.
Like that.
Correct. So I hope that answers the question. At least that's how the TTC was contemplating it when making the recommendation for approval.
Well, he does raise a good point. Perhaps the TDC might want to, at the next meeting, discuss it further and bring it back.
Mr. Chair, if I
In the
may.
meantime, yes.
As we'll see later in another presentation, the PTC has created a subcommittee to look at revamp to all of the sub-allocation procedures. So I think Mr. Osborne's idea would be a good topic for that subcommittee to evaluate.
I would agree. Thank you, Lori. Okay, with that said, not holding up progress, because I know what's coming up next. Is there a motion to move on number 6? On your agenda.
It was,
no, we
Who
already
made the
did.
motion?
we made a motion and I said so moved and someone seconded.
I didn't, somebody was there.
So while I'm talking, I'm just trying to figure out who seconded it.
You made the motion.
I
Who
made the
seconded it?
motion.
Radford, yeah.
Radford.
I think Mr. Osborne's question and raising that point is a good one. I think the intent behind the staff having the authority to take action when it's less than 10%. We come back with wording. I was trying to figure out how to easily reword it. It's kind of tough. But I think it would be 10% from the last approved project budget established by this board would be my understanding. So it could be cumulative, but it would always be based off of within 10% of what this board had last approved, whatever that may be. And so perhaps, as was brought up, that could be addressed in some future But I believe this really precedes an action that's being requested for the board to have the authority, you know, to be within our procedures to actually address a budgetary issue on a project that's on our docket next.
But in my example, the board would never have approved it because it would have both times been under the. And I'm not suggesting that there's any, you know,
Right answer, yeah.
or that anyone's trying to do anything.
Right.
I just asked if it had been thought about, because it could happen incrementally. I don't think it will.
Good question.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. Moving on to item 7, recommendation of an out-of-cycle request from the town of Memphis to utilize transportation alternative funding. 2428 of your agenda. Brian Hill.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, as it's no surprise,
Oh, really?
especially if you've read your packet. Okay.
How we supposed to take that comment? I don't know.
Means 2.5.
That's
Just after the new year, we received a request from the town of Benton for an additional $180,000 in transportation alternatives funding for the UBC 17995 Glade Creek Greenway Phase 2, an existing project that was allocated funding by this board. And in our chats with VDOT and with the town staff, VDOT guided us very properly, I think, and said that because this board did provide that initial existing allocation, that that you all should be the ones to approve such an additional request and not something that might normally be done internally at VDOT. So that's why we're here. And I am not going to stand up here and explain the reason for the request, other than to gladly pass it to Ms. Anita McMillan or to describe the reasons that she brought to the TTC and discussed with us, that again, we will ultimately, I think, classify as unforeseen.
And thank you, Brian. Taking my TTC hat off ever so briefly and putting the town of Benton hat back on, Ms. McMillan has asked that I present on behalf of the town. The staff report actually lays out the vast majority of the detail justifying or attempting to justify the need for the increase. This project was originally funded and proposed all the way back in 2017. So as was brought up in TTC discussion, part of what was operating here was that the world was a totally different place in 2017, especially when it came to construction costs and construction estimates. During active construction of the Phase 2B Greenway, a water line was found to be in its right horizontal location, but in its incorrect vertical location. So namely, the equipment found it. And so the Western Virginia Water Authority is needing to relocate that line underneath Glade Creek, and also getting within the right of way. It occurs right at where the train tracks, the Norfolk Southern tracks, go over the creek. So there's some interplay with the railroad as well. But the cost estimate that was put forward for this is approximately Anita, it's 160.
Yes.
Yeah, 160,000 plus other contingencies to the point. So in order to stay true to Mr. Osborne's sort of spirit of his question earlier, we're requesting $225,000. It would still have the 2080 match that TA projects require. So 180 from the TA funds and 45,000 of town funds to do that. So this is, water line relocation, some additional drainage work, and then some, erosion and sediment control mitigation that's going on. One of the other time constraints on this is that there's some time of year windows that we are aiming for, specifically with log perch and an expiring permit due to the length of this project. So we're happy to entertain any questions on this, but the TTC had a fairly nice discussion on it and seems to be within the spirit of unforeseen of the policy that y'all just adopted.
Any questions? I have one. When is the log purchase season, so you can't do any work?
From March 15 through.
What's that?
March 15 to June 30.
Okay, so you're not gonna hardly get started in time. Do you think you'll complete it by March 15th?
They started,
Okay.
yeah. they started
Some money, you would.
Mr. North, to your point, crews have actually arrived back on site and begun work this week, utilizing some funding that was already existing on the project.
Okay, good. All right, that's fair. Is there a motion?
I move we approve and have a cycle request from the town of Benton to utilize transportation alternative funding.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say, any discussion, any further discussion on it?
If I might just interject, if the motion could be just a tad more specific to include, the use of, funding with the use of TAP balance entry fund.
Okay.
Yes, please.
All right, let's amend that motion. I move we approve and have a cycle request from the town of Benton to utilize transportation alternative funding with the TAP included. Is that what you specified?
Balance entry fund.
Balancing fund.
Second.
Second.
Motion.
Second.
Mr. Wellington, all in favor, say aye.
Roll call together.
We sure will. Okay, roll call.
Mr. Johnson? Mr. Clinton? Ms. White? Here, Mr. Petrikowski?
Aye.
Mr. North?
Yes.
Mr. Radford?
I'm gonna say yes, and thank you for the detailed, cost estimate.
Mr. Volleson? Aye. And Mr. Reynolds?
Aye.
Mayor Turk?
Aye.
Mr. Holliday?
Aye.
Mr. Stovall?
Yes.
Mr. Huber, is he on?
He's on,
He weighs in, we'll report him. Mr. King?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes. Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. As I introduced myself, I'm Mike Stovall, and I do sit on town council and vice mayor. And on behalf of the town of Benton, I do want to thank you. And actually, this is not the first time we've done this. Might not be our last, but anyway, it's not our first time. I do want to thank you though for the town. And on a personal note, I want to invite you to Benton. Wake up one Saturday morning and think about something to do. You can look at our chamber website. We just got a lot going on. We got a couple new restaurants. If you like barbecue, we've got Poker Joe's. They got some smoked wings that are off the chain. They got some good drinks. And then we got another restaurant, 107, and it's opened by the owners of Taston Pints. And it sits right across the street from Poker Joe's. And then, of course, we've got a lot of great bands, both at our Mingles and then at Rosie's. Of course, you can go to Rosie's. Rosie's got great food. They got some great bands. They got some dual pianos that are coming. They're absolutely fabulous. And you can either win or lose money, depends on how you touch your buttons on the machine if you try that. So, but anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm gonna give my little note.
A nice commercial. You left out to increase crew.
I tried to be it. Yeah, I tried to be through. I tried to be it. It's on.
Very pursuit.
Okay.
All right. Number 8, overview of regional electric charging station study dated 29/2/30. Andrea Darling.
Good afternoon. I had to follow this thing that was on the DPC. So I have to say, I'm not gonna ask for money. Congratulations, son of Benton. And I have a friend that always tells me, I've heard Benton is nice. And I have to say, every time I go to Benton, I do think it's nice.
You move the microphone over a little closer.
Oh, all right. Do you mishold that? all my jokes. So, yes, so today I am going to just give you a quick update on a project that I'm working on currently in this fiscal year. The electric vehicle infrastructure implementation strategy, as Brian said, with like long titles. This project was included in this year's work program. We have hired a consultant that is going to drive this implementation of this plan. They are working on a similar project, similar scope with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. So we thought they were the right appropriate consultant to help us on this plan. The goal of this project is to support the development of an electric vehicle infrastructure planning document that will serve the region's localities on their future implementation goals. So more like a general assessment of how the region is ready for the implementation of electric vehicle stations around our corridors. The project, and we will cover the entire region, all our RVARC localities in our study. The project kicked off in December, and we, we're working through this general scope. Just really want to point out that really tasks 2 and 3 is the ones that will require most of the involvement from our localities. On task 2, we're going to work on a public engagement strategy that again will be more like a guide on how to engage stakeholders to support the implementation of electric vehicle stations across our corridors. And as an important goal is to identify like groups of local, public and private stakeholders that will be necessary to guide this implementation. That's decision-making once you're ready to implement and put money behind that implementation. I give this presentation to TTC members, and I have already reached out to all of them, and they have already provided a lot of information. So I will continue to engage them as I need to on information to support this plan. Task 3 is primarily data collection, a lot of GIS input. Again, I have already engaged your members of the TTC, and we have pretty much almost completed all the GIS data that we will need to begin. This is going to be kind of like the visual part of the plan, hopefully the exciting part of the plan that we can show like a general overview of like priority locations, priority corridors. We're not gonna really tell you here at this address you need an electric vehicle station, but more general areas and why. So that is the goal. And we will, we have kind of an aggressive schedule that we think because we're working with a consultant that has already a lot of the tools in place and has moved along with a similar project, we can meet this goal to finish the plan by the end of the fiscal year. This fine, this is just sort of like what we would be looking for data collection from RVARC members. Again, working on kind of crafting a stakeholder group, and that is really just having names and have identified, who are the people in your locality that you think will need to be involved. So when you're ready for it, at least you have a list or something to refer to. And, we already went through this. Are there any specific targets or locally that goals that each locality have in terms of getting to electrification of our corridors? And for the most part, what I have discovered in this like month and a half of working is that we really have not much. So the plan is really, that's what we're doing, is finding out the answers to these questions and really getting to those goals and really setting the stage to like maybe later set up those goals and those targets, etc. So I think we're all kind of on the same page. But yeah, really that's all I have to just kind of bring to your attention so this is going on. If you have really a passion for this and really want to get more involved, just contact me. Let me know your questions. Let me know how you want to drive this information. We put you on a committee. So that's all.
Thank you.
So today,
Any questions? Mr. Bradford?
Yeah, during this study, I guess your group is gonna study, the existing EV stations that are private right now, so you'll have an idea where everything is located.
absolutely, yeah, that's part of the data input. That was one of the questions, like where current electric vehicle stations in the region, and that is actually data that's readily available through state systems, so we got that information.
Will you be able to, I guess you won't be able to identify, a private residence? That, I mean, that doesn't really, you don't really need that data.
Well, the data we're looking for to address, dwellings is mostly multifamily,
Okay,
housing areas, because those are the ones where like, you have apartment buildings and, right, like if you just have your house and potentially a driveway or a garage, then you can charge your own vehicle, but it's those multi-family housing is where, you will find that you need more of a centralized area.
okay.
So the next question is, are you gonna talk to commercial businesses like Sheets to see if they're adding any capacity? Or Wawa stores, or places like that?
No, I am not going to talk to Sheets.
So you just.
So yes, and we might see it as stakeholders, as you know.
Yeah.
I think we really need to consider this, then we might consider them on a list and then create that kind of strategy to like further. So the idea is like if we have a plan, and I have said on a couple webinars related to funding that right now there's funding available for implementation. And I think what really drives that, getting that money, a lot of times it's like having a plan. It's like having something to support why you want this or where you want it. So I think that's what we want to provide. So each locality can pursue their own goals and their own specific targets. And at that point that you want us to be the ones who sit down and talk to Sheets, I guess. Does that even work?
I understand, they're all over Northern Virginia with these Sheet stores, that's why I was asking the question. There's federal money on this. Doesn't mean you're gonna get it. I think we submitted plans for 2 and didn't get it.
Right.
So but there is federal money. And that would, I would suggest sharing this list with, Senator Kane office here in town to see if they can point us in the direction of grants. And so after you produce this report, you might also share it with them as a summary to see what their recommendations are and what grants we can go after. That will add value to your report when you give it back to everybody in the room.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions?
I had a question. I mean, this probably doesn't affect Virginia, but it might be able to, but as technology has changed, like during cold weather, like the things that happened in Chicago and the northeastern states, people couldn't charge their cars. It was either the cars or it was the charging stations. They couldn't hold a charge. So are we looking at how we can alleviate those problems? I guess I don't know if it's the charging stations themselves. Are they looking into how they're going to be able to provide better charging stations that are able to work with Tesla or whoever's doing the EV cars to alleviate it? Because a lot of people were stranded during that period of time. So looking ahead, I guess in Virginia, are we looking at those ideas and addressing that as we, decide who we're going to go with or how we're going to put those in?
I actually don't really, I think as I said, we're finding out all of those answers. I think VDOT has their own corridor strategy and plan, and they have already working towards implementation. And this is all guided by the current technology and the current funding and like the kind of accelerated strategy from the government, but those specific answers, I don't have them.
Well, I mean, I guess my answer is maybe we shouldn't be trying to accelerate until we find all these glitches that possibly could come up where we're putting in charging stations that may not be adequate, may have to change them out or, So.
I will say
I think
what
that's-
sorry.
I think that's sort of a unique situation. You have a similar problem with diesel vehicles where they won't start under a certain temperature. And so I think that was what was the problem there, was that the charging stations weren't effective in charging the electric vehicles below a certain temperature. That was my understanding.
Right.
And so.
That's right.
I think in terms of how charging stations are ultimately implemented, you may have a necessity to put them in a effectively a heated area or something to overcome that. But I think this study is more taking a look at what the capacity needs might be.
Right.
What the current resources are that are available, and what would it take to get from where we are to where we think we might need to be. And there's got to be a lot of assumptions in that, particularly if we're trying to look out to 2040 and 2050. I don't know how we would be, I don't know how we'll do that.
That's, as I was answering your question, I had a thought as well. And that, for the plan itself, we're setting like a very general goal of like essentially prepare the region for implementation. And, we don't have specific targets, like, we're discussing, do we want to get to 50 or 80% of, vehicle ownership by 2040? Those are, the state and the country have specific targets for that, but, I think we're going to find out what our target is based on our readiness to do as well. And then the projections are done based on assumptions, and we will have a projection of like aggressive projection, what it will look like if everybody just wants to get to that 90 or 80%. And also a more like medium target, or just like status quo, kind of like, there's some growth charts of like what we have right now, and if we do continue at that growth, so that's kind of like the baseline. So that's essentially what we're gonna be looking at.
But I think if we look historically, at what the commission has done in the past, it has been helpful. We did studies on solid waste management. We did studies on regional water supplies. And because we had done those studies, we did them when, there were some shortages 25 years ago in our water supply. But because we had done those studies, the region was able to sit down and say, well, okay, we have resources. We just don't have, we aren't able to connect from one locality to another, and we need to improve that. And but it's always goes back to the localities to decide whether they want to participate on a regional basis and how they do that. But I think what I'm hearing you say basically is that because there's a lot of focus on this, there's potentially funding available. We have to have some kind of a plan in order to say this is what our needs will be, and that's the basis for getting any funding that might be there, so.
I'll take you to my next presentation, because that's exactly what.
I read this the other day, that EVs are sitting on dealer lots and the prices are plummeting, so, and that's backing up production.
And part of it is, it's a remedy that would need to be made by the manufacturer.
Right.
As opposed to us having to put garages with heating units. So it's,
And
I
I should
would think.
mention too, that what we're talking about is level two and fast chargers, DC chargers. So that's what we're looking at. That's the technology that I guess is currently in place in this.
And when you're looking at multifamily housing, I don't know if this is what you had in mind, but, you have to have a certain level of resources in order to have electric vehicles and EV charging. And where they have those, that are multifamily is in places like Brandon Oaks, where you have a community of people, and they have, they put in electric chargers in some of their, buildings and garages to enable people to be able to take advantage of that. So I don't know if that's in your study or not, but that's an example where you would actually, you would find there are charges there.
Yeah, and we're not there yet, but yes, that's what we're looking for. We have the data in place. And again, to those of I reached out, if there's any sparks on like, there's information you should know, just pass along.
Thank you, Andrea. Moving on to
Mr. Chair, I think Mitch Schuler raised his hand on it. I'm not sure if
Mitch.
he had
You
a
there?
question or not.
You there?
Can you hear
Mitch?
me? Can you hear me?
What's your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a quick comment. It's a good discussion and questions everyone's asking, but I'm just curious if they're engaging with the local transportation provider on their potential future demand for electricity and their projections. I know there's a big push from the federal government and from us and researching that.
I mean, electricity provider?
Transportation.
Transit provider.
Transit provider.
Yeah, for electric buses in the future.
Valley Metro, yes, we have reached out to them as a stakeholder and yes.
Okay,
Awesome.
did you hear that? Did you hear that, Mitch? All right, any other questions? All right, with that said, thank you, Mitch, for your question. Moving on to item number 9, update on surface transportation block grant and carbon reduction sub allocation program, page 31 of your agenda. Chair recognizes Allison today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So today, I just wanted to give a brief update on the FTVG and CRP sub allocation program. So I put together this timeline just to see what we're going to be looking at for the next couple of months. February, we're going to be starting a survey, and I will show a demonstration here in a moment. And that will run for 14 full days. And then in the March TTC meeting, we will have a public engagement summary of the findings from that survey effort and a finalized recommendation, hopefully, to the RVTPO policy board for the March TPO meeting. And then in the March TPO meeting, we will have the public hearing, the public engagement summary, and the recommendation from the TTC board. So that's just looking forward. And just to brief everybody on the public participation process, so we're gonna have a 14-day minimum requirement, and it's going to be from February 1st to 15th. The time's funny, but it's gonna be a MetroQuest survey again this year, and it's going to be distributed to a very large number of stakeholders that we've been updating since our last effort, and including the TTC, TPO commission members, and then on social media as well. And then a public engagement summary will be presented in the March TTC and TPO meetings. Now I'm going to do the demonstration of the survey. The survey is drafted and it will go live on the 1st. This is what it looks like. And we have screens to show the project information and the costs that the projects are requesting. And we chose this separating projects that are requesting additional funds versus projects that are requesting funds for leverage for smart scale. And every single one of them has a project information link that has a graphic and description and what the request is. And also we're working on upgrading our demographic information. So hopefully these questions will be better. But that is the demonstration of that. We'll go back to, sorry. And based on what Tori Williams said earlier, the TTC, the TTC created a subcommittee to develop criteria for, to prioritize STVG and CRP projects that are seeking leverage for smart scale. And then also to conduct a review of the STVG, CRP, and TA project development and selection procedures to better incorporate best practices from other TPOs. So that. Are there any questions?
Questions for?
Would you mind going back on the survey to explanation and summary of the issue that they're responding to?
Oh, yes.
And I realize this is just an example.
So, okay, so this first slide is a project selection slide where they are asked to please select your top project priorities. Information about priorities can be accessed by the marker. And then you select yes after you review it. So like if you were to click this one, the Orange Market Park and Ride, you would click yes or no. And then there will be like a progress bar that will occur at the top. And then,
Is there an overview of that before you get to, I mean, there's two things about this. Maybe it goes back to the welcome, but it would be nice if people could look at these projects in kind of in the whole before
Okay.
you sit down and break them down into little pieces, because once you start looking at it and you say, well, that's good or not, then all of a sudden, like you say, you run out of money. But if if you're really asking, if you're trying to get input that's going to say this one is more important than that one, then there's a lot of factors that should go into that. And I'm just curious, I don't know whether people will take the time to go through, click on each individual project, then go back and try to create their own process for comparing and analyzing which they think is more important. So, I mean, I guess it depends on what is our reason in getting this public input, but if we're really trying to get that level of understanding and reaction, then it seems like we need to maybe present a little bit more in terms of an overview.
okay.
And if there's history, then that may also be relevant. If this is a project which really is phase 2 of another project or is integral to 2 other projects that have already been approved, that can be important. So I don't know, it's an imperfect process, no matter how you do it. I'm just, I've taken some of these public service polls and I just kind of, I can't see how anyone would ever say, yes, I want to fund this.
I understand.
That's kind of been my reaction to it, but and the reason I say yes is because I have some background knowledge of what they do and what they mean. So anyway, that's kind of.
Question, Allison.
Yeah.
To Lee's point, is look under number 2 there where it says project selection. Click on that just a minute, please. Okay, and wouldn't it be nice to have, before the map pops up, what the 5 or 6 projects are described on one slide and their cost, and then say at the bottom, please go to the map to select the project and, take the survey.
You need a summary sheet.
Summary sheet.
You need a summary sheet before you click on the
That's right.
detail.
So inserting that summary sheet in there at 2 and making 2, 3 and so forth might be beneficial to folks taking the survey.
Okay. I know there's
Well, some of us in
limitations.
this room may know what some of the projects are. If you're asking the public, they don't know anything about it, so you need to give them a introductory slide.
Okay.
What do you think?
I agree. I know we have limitations. We can only have 5 slides. So trying to figure out how to ask people questions.
Who made that rule?
I meant requests. But, I know before previously I've been able to add something like that in here, but I don't know. I feel
Sure.
we can see that people don't click on it. So it's like, how do we be able to ask them?
Yeah.
To do an extra step to know. Yeah, so I agree. But I appreciate that feedback.
Other than that, it looks like it's a good product for getting input.
Yes,
Could you also click on the hyperlink when you click on a project and then you can get the overview information? And I know that's an additional step to go through, but I really do like the description here. And then the next slide of this page is the sketch, which I think is really important for people to understand what the thing is that we're asking.
So that's on all of them. So when you click on them, so that is there. Because it's a character limit for the description as well. So I definitely wouldn't be able to do any justice to try to explain this in 250 words.
Okay.
So,
Anyway, good input, Mr. Radford.
yeah, thank you.
Anyone else got any comments? Okay, thank you very much, Allison.
Thank you.
Number 10, other business. Does the members have any other business for commission?
Mr. Chair, if we can go back to the first item, the transportation safety performance measures. I have a question. This will be directed to Mr. Ken. Of all the variables involved in that. You brought up the, construction that'll be underway soon between
Yeah.
581 and exit 150. And then what you were saying, you used two magic words, well, I guess it's one magic word, enforcement. So I gather that somehow enforcement is one of the variables that's considered in this. And really whether it is or not, that kind of generates my question. Do we measure in any respect how enforcement or lack thereof, which is my point, the lack thereof, has affected accident rates or crash rates? Because we all know, and I'm grateful for this personally, but you can get by with 80 miles an hour in a 65 zone and nobody seems to care. I mean, over the past, I would say 10 years or so, enforcement has really become lax or forgiving, however you want to look at it. Is anyone considering that? I mean, I think my premise is accurate, that the floor for a speeding ticket, for example, has really gone up. 80 miles, I mean, 81, Interstate 81, or most interstates like that, prevailing speed is typically 15 miles over the posted speed.
Yeah, I'm not aware of a study that we've done in Virginia that looks at that. There may be something more broadly on a national basis that may have looked at that over time, but I have a hard enough time handling the construction of the project. I leave the enforcement to state police.
Yeah.
I will say that, Steve, 81 commission, meeting last year, Delegate Austin wrote to the superintendent asking a similar question. And the superintendent and state police replied that we were 345 troopers short. And, that pretty much sums it up. We don't have enough troopers today. We didn't last year, and it's probably gonna be a while before we have a full force. So that really stretches enforcement pretty thin.
I should have mentioned on not all of our construction projects, but certainly all of our construction projects at scale, like the ones on Interstate 81, we will have planned funds set aside to pay, troopers to be there. We will pay like overtime rates for them to be there at critical, throughout the project, and certainly at critical times when we have lane shifts and things of that nature. So it is definitely a planned priority within the project to partner with state police and law enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay.
My question was in general, not necessarily construction zones, but
I know.
yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Anyone else under other business? Okay, now we're moving on to item number 11, comment created by RVTPO policy board members and or public. Are there any TPO members that have any comments?
Yes, I do.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, right there.
I would like to have all of us welcome our new city manager from the city of Salem. Chris Dorsey comes to us from Tennessee. He has been in city government for many, many, many years, has a very, very strong background in budget and finances, and we're very thrilled to have him here. He's worked with the TPO in Tennessee and was on the board, I believe, in Tennessee. So you may be seeing him at more meetings. So we'd just like to welcome you to this meeting and to the Roanoke Valley, Chris.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Absolutely. Great state of Tennessee, no income tax, only a state sales.
Right.
Very good. Well, let's give him a round of applause. Mitch, you got another question?
No, just a brief update if the council or the board will hear me.
Sure, just go right ahead.
Yeah.
Mitch is with ERPT, Department of Rail and Public Transportation of the Commonwealth.
Yes, thank you. I would be there, but I have recovering from COVID, so lots of things are in the air around here at the Capitol. So like a brief update from our organization is our grant cycle's closing February 1. So if the TPO or any local organizations are planning on applying, go ahead and get to it. Our agency is also launching our Connecting VA campaign, and so we're running for the next month or so, we're running a series of ads and partnerships and all the free resources we have available for our commuter assistance programs. And so any businesses or anything like that, feel free to connect them through connectingva.drpt.virginia.gov. And then we're also beginning some of our early phases of our SIP and STIP development. So if you have any feedback or comments on that, we're more than welcoming those. So feel free to shoot me an email. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Mitch. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Okay, going once, going twice. All right, let me give you a plug for the Regional Commission's 2024 legislative priorities. And the legislative committee put this together, 5 priorities, some bullets, been mailed to everyone who represents us in the General Assembly. The 8.5 by 10 sheet, as well as these, you can fold and put them in your pocket when you go to Richmond to do the county's business or the town's business or the city's business. You can also say, and by the way, this is what our region supports. And delegates like it when it folds, when they stick it in their pocket. And it's first attempt at this. We're going to see how successful this is. If it's not successful, well, maybe decide not to do it next year, but because it does take a little bit of work, and appreciate staff's work on putting this all together. And there you go.
Where do we get them?
Good question. See the gentleman to my right.
Yeah, if you would like, the one sheet and the priorities list is on the website. We'll send the link out. If you would like hard copies of the postcard, just let me know. We are in-house operation. I'm printing these out right now, so we'll pull some together and get those to you. Very good.
Okay. All right, with that said,
Can we assume that we've sent these to our delegates and senators?
oh, we did. We got the right addresses and the new offices in the General Assembly building. And they're in the US mail, so they probably get there pretty soon. I hope so.
That's for the, assembly. Yeah.
Anyway, some of us are gonna go down there next week, so we'll just reinforce it. We'll find out whether they got it or not. When they say, oh yeah, I got one of these, so there you go. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Public comment?
We've been asking for comments.
Well, I asked if I could be on the agenda.
Yeah, we give you 5 minutes.
That I wear many hats. I go by bicycling, boating, backpacking, Barbara. One of my passions, those are my passions, but bicycle safety is another one of the issues. And there are several people that are representing you in Richmond that are involved in transportation. Senator Sudaline is on the Senate Transportation Committee, and Delegate Terry Austin, really want to give a big shout out to him. I had chaired the House Transportation Committee and was on the Appropriations Committee. He remains on the Transportation Committee, and locally in the area, Jason Ballard and Ren Williams from Floyd are on the Transportation Committee, Subcommittee 3. That I have written legislators, and I also copied Jeremy and the Regional Commission, the Regional Chamber, on an discussion that I had with Terry Austin. He was concerned about safety. And the reason he was wanting to represent his constituents about safety was Tabitha Thompson was a triathlete, Ironman person, was a training out in Botetourt County and got hit from behind and killed. So Delegate Austin wanted to submit some bills that would address safety. And in my research, I found that in 2004, the CTB passed a policy for integrating bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. And the policy provides a framework for VDOT to accommodate bicycles and pedestrians in the planning, funding, design, construction, operation, and maintenance of Virginia's transportation network. And then there's a statewide bicycle and pedestrian planner that oversees and coordinates interdepartmental and interagency efforts to shape bicycle and walking policies and practices and ensure statewide consistency of the 2004 policy. And hopefully this has been updated, But what I found on the website is that in June 13, 2007, VDOT Department Policy Memorandum Manual outlines the implementation of the CTB policy for integrating bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. And under maintenance, page 3, when paving schedules are implemented, districts shall strive to meet a goal of spending a minimum of 2% of a district assets, number 400, and associate paving activities budget on paved shoulders. And they give the guidelines for defining what the criteria is. With Delegate Austin's concerns about safety, he proposed several methods that I did not find appropriate. And I thought, goodness, if we could prioritize paved shoulders, particularly on long, because 2% of whatever it isn't very much, on planned and identified long distance bicycle routes, then that would help in Delegate Austin's district and the Roanoke County and Montgomery County, all these districts, because a Delegate Austin's district is Botetourt, Rockridge County, Lexington City, and Bike Route 76 actually goes through all of those areas. It's important when we're talking about vulnerable road users, and I've submitted to the regional staff and to the Bike Ped Committee some Virginia Bicycling Federation bicycle safety bills that are before the General Assembly. And I know that you are not an advocacy organization, but I'd like to educate you about the bills that are coming forward, and particularly the one today that comes for the Senate Transportation Committee that better clarifies the code of Virginia on who vulnerable road users are. So please look at your localities, that look at the Salem Construction District and see if there's monies for maintenance for paved shoulders to help vulnerable road users on and help get this vision 0, 0, 0 in our localities. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point. Any comments on what Barbara had to say, Mr. King?
Yes, sir. We follow that policy.
All righty, Jeremy, you had something?
No, Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure that Mr. Dorsey was recognized for his attendance today.
Okay, good deal. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.